Alright, so today I really want to just go over how we take a PDF from REVU over to ACC and go ahead and use the fillable form areas to help us with the reports that we can pull when we fill them out in ACC. So right now I've just got a blank project template. It's just a general document that asks for names and dates, but depending on what you're doing, depending on what kind of form you're looking to set up, the areas on this document may change. But the first thing we want to do is really just look at the types of information that are going to be located on this document. Right now we can go ahead and see that there's going to be some names, some dates, some tables with multiple areas for information, a comment section, and some signatures as well. So we can kind of wrap our head around the type of information that's going to be on this document. One thing I like to do whenever I see tables like this, and I know that the client or the project management team is going to want a list of information. When we go to create those fillable areas, it's kind of difficult to make each line of text line up perfectly. So typically what I'll do is I'll just start off by creating a rectangle around any of these open areas that just aren't really the most easy to edit with the fillable area. So I'll go ahead and actually just white this entire area out and try and get rid of any of that information and only leave the header, and I'll go ahead and actually flatten that, and then at the very end we'll flatten it again once we kind of clean up this area here. But for right now, that looks good. This document here, will actually need it on this side as well. So we'll go in and add a rectangle around this one. Alright, so I went ahead and flattened it, the entire project, so that these rectangles are no longer a selectable element. The reason we want to flatten it, and we flatten it with no recovery, so the elements cannot be unflattened. We want to make sure that when that gets pulled over to ACC or whatever management software you're using, those elements can actually be moved around within that software, and we don't want there to be little white boxes just floating around. We only want the information that we're putting in there, so the fillable areas. So now that we've done that, we can go ahead and start looking at creating fillable areas. Now I've got 2 pages, and I'm going to go ahead and start at the very top, and we're going to go over here to the fillable area and create a text box here. So I just typically pull one side all the way to the other, and I try to make the text box about the size that I'd want the text to show up as. And as we can see, it's just called text 1. I'm going to go over to my settings, and this is the first important piece of information. Whenever we're setting up our fillable form areas, the name of the bounding area is very important. We want it to match what that line is asking for. So in this case, and I use all caps, project name is going to be the name of this box. I'll go back later and change the font size and the font itself, but the next key piece is going to be the scroll long text. The reason we want to do that, so if I click here and I'm going to go ahead and type, and I'm typing, I mean, it'd be a long project name to get this far, but we do not want this to be a continuous line. We only want to allow up to this amount of information. That's why we'll change the font size later. But if we were to leave scroll long text for this particular element, we would run into an issue mostly on multi-line text, but for this case it just really is easier to go ahead and just set that to non-scroll long text. So now when we type, it'll be a hard stop at the end of that box. And then typically what I'll do is I'll click on this box, I'll drag it down and create a second one, start it right there, and pull it right back. And since these are all at the end, I can drag and it snaps. But as you can see, the name on here is not updated, obviously. Delivered on date. Delivered on date, yep. And then I will uncheck scroll long text. So we'll go ahead and do that all the way through And right now I'm only going to be moving these boxes, but we'll come back where there are dates, and we'll come back in and actually change the type of data allowed in those later. So we'll go ahead and put all the boxes in. We'll then come back once we get to this section here, and I'll show you how we do that. Alright, now that we're back down here at the bottom, I'm going to go back up and look at the different pieces of information here. I see that this one is a date, so I'll go down here to the format section. I'm actually going to click on date, and I have a couple options: month, day, year, month, day, 4-digit year. I like to do 2 month, 2 day, 2 year, so that there is a clear, distinct date. There's no confusion to the information as far as date or year, 1996 or 2096. Obviously we're not there yet, but regardless of, I want to make sure that the date and the month and the specific day are very clear. So that information is now going to be only allowing a format of month, month, day, day, year, year, year. So that is good. Now if we come down here, we create another text area. The way I set these up is going to be with a small bounding box area that allows for multi-line text. So the way we'll do that is similar to that of the regular line of text. So we won't do scroll line, but we will do multi-line. This allows us to hit enter, and it goes down line by line by line, and because we're not scrolling, it does have a stop right there at the bottom of the box. So we'll just go up here to the information, deliverable name, and then let's go ahead and actually change that. Deliverable name, scroll along text is off. We'll change the font and everything. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to copy across. I hold shift to keep it in the same plane, and now I have the next one, so I will make this multi-line and scroll along off. Deliverable number blank of blank. Try to match the exact same naming so that when it pulls on a report, I will actually see the information that was added to it. So date delivered, these will be dates. And approved by. I'm just going to go back and make sure multi-line is on and scrolling is off for all of these. So I'm curious if I put a date here, month, day, day, year, year, year. So that's all good, and we can test it out. Escape. Now they're grayed out, so I can go in, put the information. I'm going, and it stops there at the very bottom as a hard stop. So that's good to know. Deliverable number blank of blank. I'm going to leave these formatted for text. Depending on what kind of information, what kind of equipment, whatever it might be. Sometimes numbers will also carry an A, B, C, and you don't want to hard lock someone's information into only numbers or only letters, so I typically leave it up to the person putting in the information. It did move correctly. So now we'll go back. We've got all these texts here. We'll go back and do the same thing, copy down from the top and fill in all the information here. Typically there is, and I didn't catch it until I just moved it, typically there is a printed name before an actual signature, but in this case we have just a signature. And the way we're going to do that is with the signature, digital signature here. So we'll draw a box similar to that of the other areas, but depending on the information, you'll know your form hopefully better than the person that's filling it out. You want to designate something as required or not, and the way we can do that is same way, going here, changing the name, signature, and we have it listed as required. So that will add a red box around the element here, letting us know that is a required signature. We'll more than likely need the project manager's signature as well, so we'll copy this text field down. We're gonna make it fit. Unfortunately, it's not the most area, but we'll try and make both of them match just by bringing this down a little bit. Name this. We'll go ahead and copy down. I'll set this to required as well, and we'll copy down one element of text for the date. And I know it's probably exaggerated the length that this needs to be, especially for just a date, but in this particular instance, it's not too big a deal. The data that goes in it is only going to be shown left to right anyway, so it's not going to take up the full line, and when we export the data, it doesn't really matter the length of the box. Looking back over this, I decided that I may have wanted to shorten this particular instance of the date format. The reason doing so would be ACC allows for a drop down when you have a date selection field. That drop down is connected at the far right end of the text box. So if your date is all the way on the left hand side of the page and the selector's on the right, it just makes for a little bit more work on the user putting in the information. Not a whole lot of an issue, but in this case I may have wanted to shorten it. But again, it's personal preference. You don't have to do that. It's just an ease of use thing on the tip box. So now I've added a little bit of information. So if I were to just name this date, I believe there may be other times where we have the word date next to a line. So in this instance, I'm going to say date of signature, just to give a little bit more information to the data that's going in there. So now that's listed as date of signature. It's a month, day, year, and scroll along text has been turned off. So now we'll just go over to the next page, and as you can see, date for the project manager signature is also there. So what we can go back and do, date of, and we'll go ahead and add a little bit more information, client. So that client's signature is now tied to this date. In case there was a difference, I'm gonna go ahead and copy this, paste it over here, and move this down. And now we'll just name this one date of project manager signature. So now the information that gets put in here when it gets exported will be correct to the information that we want to see. And this looks like a duplicate on the form, but we can also add some information here. Actually, we'll make these dates required. If you're going to sign, you also need to have the date required. So we're going to copy down these two elements here. And the reason we're going to do that is because on the next page, we see here, there is a client signature again and a date again, but we're going to name these slightly different because if you remember, there's supposed to be comments here. So this is supposed to be an area for the approval. If not approved, we need to have information as to what needs to be changed. So we'll go ahead and add a text box similar to that of the table area, and we'll allow that person to fill this information out however they see fit, and we'll name this probably comments, rejection comments, just so we have an information on what's going in here. And we'll hit multi-line and turn the scroll text off, rename this rejected client signature, copy that, and then call this date of rejected client signature, turn off scroll along. These are required. Actually, these will not be required because this information may or may not be filled out. So now we have a date. This is considered multi-line, no scroll. So now that we have all the information in, each one of these elements has a proper name that it should have. We can actually click all of these, go to our settings, and see this information here. But the better way to go in and edit them is to select them all at one time. I during my college days to use Century Gothic, so that's kind of what's ingrained in my brain. And typically 10 works out best from what I've seen. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put all these to Century Gothic 10. Looks good. You don't need to add a tooltip, so the tooltip would just be a further description of the name of the element. The only thing that's getting pulled in the report is the name, and so that's typically all that we can change, or want to change rather. You can save it if you'd like, but for our instances, this is plenty. So now that we have all this information, I can go through, double check really quick, make sure everything looks good. I can type in here and see if everything comes in properly. Obviously that's a date, so it's not going to accept that information. We'll go back. This is a signature. It's going to ask if I want to upload a file. Only on REVU does it really want to do that. Is this listed as a date? I believe it is. Let's double check. Format. Oh, there we go. So I need to set that to date. So next thing we're going to do, we're going to take this document over to ACC and set up our form with this PDF template.